Today we're going to look at the concept of a communication silo. Now this is a relatively new phenomenon as far as the Western world is concerned. It's not unusual in an authoritarian regime where a central authority, the state, controls the means of communication and the type of information and ideas that people receive are consistent. They're the same. There are no alternatives. North Korea is a classical example as far as authoritarian regimes are concerned, where the message, the ideas which are communicated to the population at large are the same. And we see this in all authoritarian regimes, so this is nothing new. Historically, it's nothing new. But what we've seen in so-called Western parliamentary democracies or liberal democracies, we have seen the same problem arise. What we have seen is a shrinking of the type of ideas which are circulated, not just in terms of the number of people this affects, but the range of concepts and ideas. So why in an age of instant communication do we have these information communication silos? Well, to a significant degree, what we are seeing is the unwillingness and inability of people to access information outside their belief system. The difference today is that you don't need to access any information outside your belief system, whether it's religious or a political or a cultural system. Communication mechanisms are so widespread that what we see is that people tend to continue to have the same opinions irrespective of reality. Now, reality has a problem. Well, we have a problem. Reality bites. You may not believe in gravity, but you may find yourself in a communication silo where gravity is something that is not accepted. Now, obviously, if I walk off a cliff, that's the end of me, because gravity does exist and reality bites. Currently, we are seeing around the world the increasing effects of the climate emergency. We see it in Northern Europe as I speak. We'll see it here in Southern Hemisphere in a few months' time. We see it consistently. And every available indicator, scientific indicator, indicates that things are changing. And things are changing because of the impact that the human species has had on planet Earth. But there are significant sections of the population, including in this country, in many regards the majority of the people on the planet Earth, who have no belief, and that's the key, in the climate emergency. And this is highlighted by the fact that we have media outlets in the World Wide Web, as well as the legacy media, that continue to act and speak as if, in the words of the Washington buffoon, the climate emergency is a fraud. Although reality tells us a different story. As the United States of America celebrates its 250th birthday, We see many events cancelled because of the heat, the type of heat that those areas have not experienced. But we see people whose economic life is dependent on us continuing to use fossil fuels, manipulating the system through communication silos to tell people the climate emergency doesn't exist and the work of tens of thousands of scientists is irrelevant. Now we see this in various ways in this country. Currently, we are seeing the rise of divided nation. Now, divided nation, commonly known as One Nation, is a particularly odious political party. It's odious not because of its policies, but because of its structure. The leader, Pauline Hanson, is president for life. She has the ability, she's the only one who can actually tap the next leader on the shoulder and tell them, you're it. The national executive is a little bit like Whitlam's faceless men. The fact is that the national executive is virtually unknown to the population. Branches are irrelevant. They're not even allowed to hold a bank account. And then if you look at the policies, although the political party is called One Nation, its actual name, its registered name is Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party, the fact is that the policies that this particular party is advocating may have been policies which were relevant, or current I should say, at the beginning of the 20th century when the White Australia policy was introduced in this country, but they are no longer relevant. But we see an increasing number of Australians who are so disillusioned with the process, not looking at reality, but looking at the spectacle that somehow a political party which is supported by billionaires is somehow going to resolve their day-to-day issues. These information silos reinforce our ideas, irrespective of how irrational they may be. They reinforce our ideas because there is no communication, no major, not even minor communication between various sections of our society. People tend to keep to themselves. Religious groups keep to themselves. We even have an education system which promotes division by dividing education into a public and private component, which means that certain sections of society that have advantages other sections will never enjoy will never interact with the rest of society. So what we see is stereotypes formed because of these information silos. Stereotypes that have little to do with reality, over and over again. Another thing we see with these information silos is crime. Now we are told we are in the midst of a crime wave. The fact is that if you look at statistics, criminal activity in the 70s and 80s and 90s was much more prevalent than it is today. But because of these information silos, where people are not willing to look at facts and figures because they are so disillusioned with those who control the political debate, that they are happy or willing to ignore facts and figures because of their disillusionment and marginalisation. The fact is, Most Australians who find themselves in difficult situations today blame the government, in inverted commas. They don't blame the fact that every major political party in this country has supported a neoliberal ideology for the last 50 years. And the fact is that neoliberalism, which is we've spoken about before, which is deregulation, privatisation, globalisation and corporatisation, pauperises the majority of the population at the expense. A few prosper at the expense of the majority of the population. But because of these information silos, which we tend to be addicted to, silos which reinforce our own opinions and our own prejudices, we begin to blame the other for the situation. And we're told consistently that if the other is removed from society, that somehow our fortunes will improve. The fact is, information silos not only prevent people from looking at reality and preparing for what reality may bring, but information silos also prevent people from communicating. It's interesting that religious organisations seem to have understood this, and the leadership of some, not all, religious organisations in this country are part of an interdenominational groups where they attempt to look at the other person's viewpoint and somehow come to some understanding which will lead to a more peaceful society. But unfortunately in 2026, the World Wide Web, has allowed us as individuals to go down various rabbit holes, to be consumed by information silos, by the information which is spewed out of these information silos. And what we are seeing is the creation of greater and greater divisions in society, which have little to do with reality, with the reality we need to face. It's a little bit like the old head in the sand approach to life's problems. You keep your head in the sand until the problem becomes unsolvable. But we are not doing this just on an individual basis. We are doing this on a community basis. And there are huge sections of our community which now believe that reality doesn't exist, who now think that all you need is a belief system in order to survive and prosper, who don't look at the nuts and bolts, how things are arranged, who wins and who loses, how institutions are structured in such a way to ensure that those who enjoy the fruits of this country continue to join the fruits of this country. And when governments make minor reforms, it looks like it's the end of the universe. The reality is, and that's the word, the reality, that as a species we face significant challenges. And those challenges you can describe as the four horsemen of the apocalypse, that old biblical term. Increasing population growth. People say population is stable. It hasn't stabled yet. It continues to increase. A planet with finite resources. That's right, finite resources. Irrespective of our ingenuity, As far as harvesting and managing these resources are finite. Nothing highlights this than the race different sovereign nation states are involved in to access critical minerals. Then we have the climate emergency as a result of human activity on this planet. And last but not least, the whole planet has been consumed by an ideology which is stronger than any religious belief. And that ideology is that the only way forward is through a private investment for private profit's sake. And what we've seen as the 21st century progresses, all those wins, all those processes that have been put in place to ensure there was a more egalitarian community come under increasing pressure as the neoliberal ideology highlights these inequalities. So we are in a difficult time. And the last thing we need is information silos. The last thing we need is communication silos, where we refuse to acknowledge reality, where we refuse to accept scientific challenges, where we refuse to accept there is a climate emergency. And nothing highlights this more than the actions of the United States of America, and obviously the actions of other players on the planet like Russia and China and North Korea and Iran. And I could go on and on and on. But the reality is that we need to face reality. I know it sounds like a tautology, but if we are unwilling to face reality and continue to keep our heads in the sands, nothing will change. So ultimately, if you find yourself in a rabbit hole of your own making or of somebody else's making, if you find yourself in an information silo, if you find that only one source provides your worldview, then it's time to break out of that straitjacket and address the issues which we need to address as individuals, communities, and sovereign nation states.